Hi, I'm Rob Smith, the CEO and founder of Lionfish Tech Advisors. Today, we're running a webinar on up-leveling your competitive intelligence, and that will be run by Lionfish's CI expert, Robert Rhame. Robert is a former Gartner analyst and has been covering CI basically since the market started to exist and knows far more about it than me. If you have any questions at all, please add them into the chat and we will try and get to them either during the presentation or as it ends. Thank you so much for attending. Robert, it's all yours.
Thanks, Rob. My name is Robert Rhame, as mentioned, a market intelligence advisor at Lionfish. Welcome to this presentation on up-leveling your competitive intelligence. This is primarily a knowledge transfer session. I'm not going to be selling at you. When we start selling, and if we start selling, we will definitely tell you when we're going to do that. So let's start off with the big question. And I don't know where everyone is on their competitive intelligence journey with your program. I guess if you were attending this, then you're either somewhere on one side or the other. Maybe you're thinking about getting into competitive intelligence. I'm not exactly sure who all is in the audience, so I'm just going to start off with something rather vague and kind of funny. What is competitive intelligence? And personally, I grew up in the 70s, so maybe I'm dating myself, but we did have Mad magazine, and Spy versus Spy was one of my favorites. Everybody thinks that competitive intelligence is some kind of skullduggery. You're running around like Cloak and Dagger, 007 with the Spectre menace out there, when actually a lot of it winds up being a lot of unthankful or not thankful, or I guess just grunt work. You're doing a lot of hard work, trying to find information, trying to validate information, trying to keep information up to date, making sure the stakeholders are happy. And while it's glamorous to think that it's spy versus spy, the reality is that you're basically a one-man band in a lot of situations, or your team is, depending on how big the organization is. You're doing a little bit of everything. You're running around. You're basically doing a lot of brush fire management, and all of this depends on how structured you are. If you're not structured, then you're this guy. The more structured you are, the better things get. But for the long and short of it, everybody thinks that you're going to do stuff that maybe you didn't even think you were supposed to be doing, and then you wind up being reactionary. And the more reactionary you are, the more you are this guy. And that is kind of one of the things that I'm going to try to get through with this presentation and help you avoid being. So I guess about 20 something years ago, I found this cartoon on the left. It's in German. Sorry, it doesn't exactly not everybody reads German, but the little words in red there, it says es geschieht hier ein Wunder, or es geschieht ein Wunder, and that means that a miracle occurs. And you can see how complex and everything is, and then it talks about the install. And on the bottom, the translation is very good work, but maybe we should be a little bit more detailed here. And then, of course, on the other side, I don't know which one of these comes, but it's really, if you're thinking that a miracle is going to occur, that's not the way that it's going to work. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of organization that's required, and I know that at the risk of that being a statement of the obvious, that's what it is. And if you think that a miracle is going to occur to uplevel your program, you're going to wind up staying at a very low level, and it's going to be a lot of work and frustration. So when you talk about all the different artifacts or things or whatever that we produce, you're developing content that, running programs. You're doing. I mean, most people think competitive intelligence. The first thing they do is they slap their knee and they go, battle cards. That's what competitive intelligence is. It's all battle cards, when that's actually one of the things that competitive intelligence does. But there's a reason why I have all this stuff scattered all over the page. I mean, you've got impact assessments. You're sitting there enjoying your last email on a Friday night. You've already shut down your laptop and it's 5:30 at night and somebody calls you from the United States and says such and such a vendor just made an announcement. Okay, now that's when you're this guy. That's when you're the one man band. If you're not getting in front of stuff like that, then you get led by the nose into your weekend, which is a really bad time. Now, impact assessments are very important, but does it have to be done all on your own on a Friday night when the salespeople are hanging up their hats anyway? They're not going to read their email until Monday. So if you allow things to just be knee jerk, then you wind up having a lot of reactionary or brush fire management. I mean, the one of the key things that I've always noticed is that throughout the year, it's a lot of work. You do a ton to keep things moving, but then once a year, there's always the big focus on competitive. And when is that? The sales kickoff. That's when everybody says wakes up and that they all start talking competitive. You know it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen, but are you prepared for it? Have you already been talking with the stakeholders? Have you been talking with the various different people? Have you been doing the intelligence gathering all along, having your network spread out like when I mentioned Spectre? A good intelligence person has their tentacles into every different department in the organization. They're looking at the various different data sources. For example, doing a business intelligence analysis of the CRM, looking at Salesforce from an analytic standpoint, doing interviews to determine how you're doing on win loss churn, working with enablement to develop content for ramp up of sellers, doing exit interviews with people that come over from competitors. It's a very good way of actually validating the information that you've already got. And then when you think you're all done, you have to develop unique content for the partners. Now that's a little bit odd because you know that as soon as anything goes outside the door or to a customer, it's going straight to the competition. So you have to completely up level it, abstract it, and still make it valuable. Um, and then of course more and more. Now this stuff is all over the place, and that's usually what a competitive intelligence program is if it's not run well. So that's why I'm talking about up leveling it. And I use this smart art graphic, which actually is I've never used smart art, but for this presentation I decided to use it. So what I'm saying here is that you need to add structure. And how you do that is you begin to think about your sponsors, your allies, your networks, and your constituencies. You go from on the left hand side, the ad hoc, to, you're doing artifacts, you've got activity, you're making some noise, but there's really not much formalized anything. You're being dragged around, as if you got your foot caught in the stirrup. You move up a little bit and you have a nascent program. You've introduced some metrics. You've got some various different owners. You might have some feedback loops and you even have your objectives, but you're not getting established or scaling yet. When you start getting established, you've got SLAs, you've got ODMs. ODMs are outcome driven metrics. And if you've got that, then you have the justification, and SLAs and ODMs come very close together. But you can also demonstrate the improvement that you're doing and you're building repeatable processes as you move up. And your goal is really a demonstrated difference in the organization and you justify your right to live, so to speak. And that's kind of where you want to get. You want to get to scaling, but you're probably some of the programs are ad hoc, some of them may be nascent. You might have stuff that's even scaling, but still have stuff that's not working properly. So the key here is to begin thinking about your sponsors, allies, networks, and constituencies, and then begin to add your structure in. And I know this sounds a little bit funny, but you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So the first thing you have to look at is who does it serve? Who does your program serve? And notice that I left those boxes down at the bottom so that you're able to begin to tie these to it. If you don't have executive sponsorship, and usually, I mean, in most organizations, it depends. I mean, maybe you've got the CI team in sales. That's not necessarily a good location for it, in my opinion. And maybe you've got it in product. also not so good because they get pulled in different directions. They serve both of those organizations, but I think CI works really well in the marketing organization, and your sponsorship would be your CMO. That gives you your imperative and your remit, and gets your air cover when you need to be on a call, or you need to be the person in the room who's the expert. However, you need someone who says, "This is how we're doing it," and Robert is our guy, for example. You've got your allies, the KT and collaboration. That's the knowledge transfer and collaboration. When I say collaboration, it could be that you're working with very closely to collect a lot of competitive bids, and then feed those into the pricing desk so that you can make sure that your the person doing your pricing, your revenue ops is actually getting things right so that the pricing and packaging is correct. Those are allies, but allies could also be a VP of regional sales. It could be your worldwide solution architecture manager. It could be someone in product. It could be, these various different people. These are experts. They're SMEs. They can give you information and then feed it back into the program, but they can also tell the people that are under them that they need to help you and work with you. And that's where you get your networks and working groups. Networks and working groups wind up being something separate in that scenario. You've got very often, and I'm going to break this down later, you've got various different silos within your program, and you may have an owner up here, but you're going to have various different people that are contributing. And then, of course, what most people think of when they think of competitive intelligence is actually the end users. That's your end user constituency. They're the consumers mostly, but they serve a good purpose in terms of field operations and like the rumor mill and stuff like that. But don't expect them to be super involved. They're going to be consumers of your materials. So now I'm going to take it one level further. So remember, I'm keeping the boxes at the bottom so that you see like how we're going to move up from nascent to scaling. And when I say break objectives down into areas, you create a Word document with the various different areas, and you these are pillars, they can be domains, however you want to view them, they need to be broken down to a pretty good bite-sized chunk, and then you assign a sponsor. You have owners. There could be multiple owners from multiple groups. You have allies, and then you have your networks. And you list all of those, and it's all agreed upon. Then you begin to talk about your metrics, your SLAs, your time frame, your deliverables, your artifacts, and the outcome. The outcome has to be something that's measured using the metrics. This is it's a formal way of doing this, and I'll show you how this works visually here. So we're going to talk about win-loss and churn analysis. Win-loss and churn is one of the most valuable things that a competitive intelligence program does. There's the quantitative side and the qualitative side, but the outcome winds up being the summaries for constituents. Now, I hit that in orange because that's the most important thing that you're doing. You're summarizing and giving the what does it mean to the constituents, and in this case, it's going to be the executive leadership team. So you're defining your constituents up at the top, but you also the further you get your I guess the aperture, so that you're including other constituents. Now you may not give them all the information, but the more you share with your competitive program, the more people are willing to give you more information to just that your program is justified. Now, when I say quantitative, you get into Salesforce, you do some reports, and or you do a direct connection with Power BI or Tableau or whatever, and you build a dashboard and you begin to analyze your win-loss reasons, what competitors you're seeing, and then you begin to run into one of the first things that's going to happen when you touch any CRM system, and that's the data is garbage. That's another problem for you in the future, is to inspect the deals and make sure that the sales managers are making sure that the best data is in there, because without that, you can't report out very, very, very good information. You can give directional to the constituents. Now, qualitative, that's a different thing. So you're going to be running reports and looking at actual third party interviews. This is not exactly a cheap program, but it's something that's worthwhile because what the interesting thing about running a third party interview of a deal that was won, lost, or it's a a lost customer. So in that you've got your salespeople, you've got also the customer success, you've got your renewals people. They're going to give different reasons than what the customer might give, and therein lies the gold. Um, Interestingly enough, if you are doing quantitative and qualitative analysis and you harvest enough lost with no reason or whatever, there's various different ways. I no decision made was one of the interesting things. I was able to fund my entire program by nailing deals that really weren't lost and re-engaging with them. I was able to pull in, or the salesperson was able to pull in twice what my program cost, and that's just one way to kind of pitch it. Is if you go that way, but this is win loss analysis. This is one of the most important things, and it's also just a demonstration for if it doesn't fit on a slide, it's not logical. You're not going to be able to articulate it. Maybe you should start using smart art, which I don't like, but it works really well when you're trying to simplify the various different domains and areas and articulate what you want to do. I'm going to show that now in another way. Another domain is knowledge transfer. So first you've got your self-service portal um, or portals. That's the static content. Then you've got your live, dynamic, regular all hands, sales kickoff, tactical team calls, enablement sessions, your analytics. Effectively, what we've got here is too much information, right? Okay, it's the wrong visualization to start with. It doesn't work. It's it's not because you're not doing all these things, but you're tracking it at a level that's way too high. Get down a level. Get down into the level that you can actually create metrics and measure it. Otherwise, it's too much information. You're going to be hitting, big Tom Sawyer wide strokes, paint all over the fence, and you're not really going to be able to demonstrate that you're doing a good job. This done right, your Word document will give you your objectives for the year. It simplifies that process so much, and it simplifies your review at the end of the year as well. Here's knowledge transfer done better. Okay, it's a little bit more simple. You've got SCO. This is the big thing that's happening every year. Your sales kickoff, right? You've got people that never touch competitive ever are going to want to talk competitive. So how do you get in front of that? How do you make sure that you're involved in the ideation and the knowledge creation or the content creation, and that you have a dedicated CI track that you're leading or at least part of? Because very often the executives will storm to the top and try to say, okay, we're going to waive the competitive thing, and you just need to make sure you've got your hand in there. You know it's coming, you know when it's coming, you know who's owning it. That's where you basically say, okay, I'm not owning SCO. Here's the owner. I'm one of the people that's going to be doing stuff. So you build that into your Word document. The regular webinars. This is like live content that you're doing. All hands compete. It's these are regular appearances where you have competitive corner, for example. You show up, you do 5 minutes, you talk about some win loss, or you talk about the new things that you've published to your compete portal. You've talked about a video that you recorded, or whatever. And then, of course, you've got your monthly external with partners, perhaps, or you have stuff that you're doing that you're recording and putting it up on a portal. That becomes static content. Uh, this is all stuff that you wind up like having through regular webinars. You reuse it, and then what you need to do as part of your Word document is begin to capture, or either that or in an Excel, your impression counts, the number of attendees, and if you're doing win loss as well, you can begin to correlate with the seller performance. That's what's interesting. is when you start looking at the sellers that have the best win rates, and you are able to say those sellers are using this content. That's easier to do with battle cards than it is with people sitting in on things. But just that's what you're looking for. You're looking at analytics, metrics, and being able to justify your program and justify the investment, justify additional headcount, resources for research, that type of stuff. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at developing eventually outcome-driven metrics so that if someone says we would like you to support this, you say, okay, I can do that, but either I have to drop one of these other vendors or you need to give me these resources. Look up outcome driven metrics if you're not familiar with them. Very, very valuable when having the discussion for what you're going to do for the year. So, self service content, battle cards. Notice I've used a different uh, visualization than the last one. Sorry, going to make people sick. This visualization is rather simple. It can be very complex underneath. You have various different owners. You have people that your allies, the people that are the gatekeepers of these webinars. You've got your monthly or weekly sales call. You've got allies that you could be doing team calls. These are, the VP of regional sales. They give you an open door and say you can show up anytime. Please tell them in advance to make sure that you're not going to just be sitting there and doing nothing. But that's very valuable to sit in with them and actually have build that rapport. Uh, but there's no way that you can attend every call. It'll kill your day. So the next visualization, this is again smart art. Interestingly enough, my favorite thing, not true. And this is where I'm breaking it out so that you can see how it might look a little bit more on the Word document. But it's also just a visual thing. You've got your sponsor, your CMO up at the top. You got a couple of owners. These are the two people maybe in CI. Your allies. I've been talking about the regional VP of sales, your chief revenue officer, your worldwide SA manager. Then you've got something in your network, the SMEs. So that's the solution architects, perhaps your systems engineers. I don't know what you call your pre-sales people, and your product managers. Product managers very often work in a silo doing product requirements documents. And to do that, very often they have to do a lot of research. They have a lot of information. Maybe the developers have a lot of information. Get that information. Make sure that they're feeding back. They can be the ones that can act as a virtual team to help you with checking and supplying content. These are facts that and then just document when you've added them so that you can go back and check them. So one of the most important things when you're talking about battle cards is you can't. I'm from Lionfish, so I'm just going to say don't boil the ocean, please. But get a consensus on your tier one and tier two. One of the best things that you can do with competitive is support the PMMs, the product marketing managers. Make sure that your competitive positioning is strong. If the competitive positioning is strong, then you can get rid of all of the little vendors that are out there, the small mice in the field, ankle biters, whatever you want to call them. You see them occasionally, and if you're doing analytics on your CRM, you know how often you're seeing these vendors, and you'll know how many are actually T1s, and you'll know how many are T2s, and then of course the T3s that are never going to get updated. They get maybe some content created. You can automate the solution for finding some information on them, but you're not going to spend a huge amount of time on them. And then set an SLA for updates of T1 and T2. Now T1 is tier one. You're going to have maybe five. Don't get more than five. You don't have more than five. I promise you. Even if you've got 50, you've got five. And you need to find a way to get five. And you need to make sure that you're involving your allies in the consensus and also your critics. Don't forget your critics, because if they're saying your program isn't working well, then you need to have them on board when you say you're going to do these vendors and those vendors on T1 and T2 and set an SLA. Then you deliver that targeted list. And then you measure the usage and compare that with the seller success and report on it. Okay, this is a different visualization. I'm kind of talking. Hopefully you're catching this stuff. It's structured, but you need to put it in the same format in Word so that you can track it as you go through the quarters and as you go through the year. I don't know how you want to track it, but I found it's pretty easy to in Word to add another set of bullets and then to use the hierarchy. And then the next thing you know, I've got like a lot of the nuances that come into the complexity of a specific pillar or silo or whatever you want to call it. But in this case, it's self-service content, battle cards, one little thing. So I've given you some structure and I'm returning to this slide because now you see like how chaotic everything can really be. And if you add a little bit of a structure, you can see how much you can actually get control of it. And why I'm saying that is because I want you to start, structure, simplify, or stop. Don't just keep doing the same thing. There was something that Ira Winkler talked about, like about how the the size of a horse's butt was actually the specification for how wide the cars are and how wide railroads are and all this other stuff. And then just because you're doing the same thing um, over and over again, it you wind up with no change. And what I'm saying there is that very often you'll have a situation where the salespeople scream the loudest and they say they want you to have 35 battle cards, all T1. Okay, when you talk about outcome driven metrics, okay, let's talk about that. What's it going to take to have 35 battle cards up to date all the time, not to have anything, missing? Are you going to have a huge amount of automation? Are you going to have lionfish aquarium, for example? Or are you going to have, sorry, I was selling, I didn't tell you. But are you going to have additional people? Are you going to have interns? What are you going to have to deliver that? And if you don't begin to structure this stuff, or you don't begin to simplify and stop, then you're not going to be able to do 35 battle cards. I can tell you personally, because I was never able to get this one particular organization people to say, come to consensus and say, okay, we're not going to do all these battle cards. And if that had been the case, I would have done it would have been a lot easier. Let's put it that way. Um, Impact assessments. I talked about that before. Setting an SLA on impact assessments is very important. Otherwise, you wind up with people that say, okay, it's your responsibility, you're doing it, and that's not the case. Impact assessments are best done with a network. It's best done with representatives from various different teams. You might even have somebody from strategy, it's an ally, and they come in and they help you out. It could be somebody from product who's knows the specific area of the market really well. What does the impact assessment mean? Because usually what I found was that if your messaging is strong enough, it's just a press release. Your marketing team should have strong enough messaging that just because something new gets announced, you're going to fall back on your old messaging 9 times out of 10. And the other thing is you have a proximity problem because you think, oh, this is going to happen immediately. Well, they just announced it. That doesn't mean it's GA. That doesn't mean it's actually like for real. So you actually need to step back before you start throwing things out. Oh, one thing about impact assessments before almost immediately when you get into an organization, make sure that you have the right to send emails to everyone, because that's a good way to get out an impact assessment via PDF. But anyway, impact assessments are important, but just make sure that you're able to get some rationality in there. Setting some SLAs, the battle card creation. The creation really winds up being something that you need to simplify as well. You need to automate it as much as possible. I'm selling aquarium. We'll talk about that in a second. Another great way to get information is competitor exit interviews. Start that if you're not doing it. Talk to your HR partner talk to your sales allies. Make sure you know when somebody comes in from the competition and have them sit down with you and validate as much information as you can. It will give you such good resolution on your understanding of the competitor with only a little bit of bitterness that you have to take as a grain of salt. And then one other thing, creating new content, I put new in parentheses there. Think about it. If you create new content, you will have to maintain it. You'll have to maintain it forever, or you'll have to retire it. And that's something that you need to think of as the life cycle of content, because it's just like highway. For every mile of highway you build, you're going to have to build in the maintenance of it. Then, of course, assessing your feedback loops. If you can get a deal desk, if the salespeople will give you deals, that's a great thing that you can do is pricing collaboration. And one thing that I think is one of the most valuable is a future competitive landscape. Engineering and product management are very, 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 at least from the conversations I've had with other CI people, they're difficult to work with because they think they know exactly what they're doing and they know their area the best. If you get everyone to look at the future competitive landscape in advance, then what you can wind up doing is get them on board with the executive leadership team, senior leadership team, VPs, and talk about like where things are going to be, where you think they're going to be, and then justify it based on the information that you have, and they can justify it with the information they have. And the next thing you know is you've got something that you can really build support the strategy group with, or the strategy group can support you. Anyway, get your consensus with sponsors, critics, and allies. And with that, Rob, I think I'm at the end of my content, but not the end of what I want to talk about.
Indeed. Thanks, Robert. Really useful. Robert doesn't want to sell you something, but I certainly do. Um, First and foremost, competitive intel is beyond important in this economy, beyond important in this global unstable. But if you have bad data, you can't do it. And you can't really look at just the web on its own. If you take any of the CI tools and use their AI functionality, they're going to go out and they're going to find a ton of data for you. And we have our own tool. It's called the Aquarium, and we have an AI portion that goes out and finds a ton of data. However, what we found is that data is at best 70 to 80% accurate and anywhere from 6 to 18 months out of date. And if you want to be competitive, you need current info. How do you adjust your messaging based on the current trade show, based on what's going on in the world? You need analyst vetted data. And so, what our real unique point as Lionfish is, we're not saying, hey, we have the best CI tool. We're saying we have the only CI tool where you have pre-populated data in it for your particular market with you and your competition that's been vetted by an industry expert, be it anything in IT security like EPP or XDR, or something like IoT, or something like telecom. You name it, we cover it. Lionfish is 35 former Gartner analysts, and all of us have our own particular expertise. In my case, I cover the firewall market, I cover the MDR market, and I cover the SASE market. But all in all, today the aquarium's covering about 50 different markets. And so, as you can see from the couple of screenshots here, we have the ability to generate battle cards. We have the ability to generate battle cards not only just generic you versus the competition, but also based upon job function, something really unique. We have the ability to create assets for you. And for anybody who's dealing with surveys from friendly analyst firms, we have the ability to auto-complete those surveys for you with vetted data. Now, we aren't perfect, but what we do say is that we save about 80% of your time. What you were going to do on your own, imagine having 80% more time to do it. Take a former Gartner analyst, take an AI tool, take a CI tool, and take personally vetted all data, plus your own internal data that you can feed into your own private instance of the aquarium, and out comes magic. That's what we are selling today. And if you'd like a demo, please reach out to Lionfish because we're more than happy to provide one.
One of the things that I'd like to just point out here, Rob, is that the generate battle card that really plays into the simplify thing. I was able to onboard a client in about a week. I didn't spend a ton of time per day, and I got their battle cards up and running, and then handed off their prompts. That was something that they asked me to do, so it's just one of those things where I it's very simple to maintain a fairly complex prompt, and it simplifies your battle card generation, which is a non-differentiating thankless task, quite honestly, for CI is maintaining battle cards. But also, I mean, if you look at some of the other stuff, the product comparison, you look at uh, vendor A, vendor B, you can generate that very quickly. This stuff is easy to create, and that's what I talk about when I talk about simplification and stopping. So rather than spending all your time trying to track down the latest information and make sure that it's in the right spots, you can simplify that drastically. And I'm doing that for right now. So
Fantastic. Thanks, Robert. I have a few questions and comments from the audience, but before we do that, maybe you can just click ahead, and I want to talk about next week first. So, as you may know, former Gartner team manager, AI lead Scott Nelson is a fish. And next week, he's doing a presentation on the smartest AI move you can make, namely stop, and stop right now. The sign up link will be in the chat in a second. And with that, let me just give a couple of questions slash comments. First off, first comment is from somebody named Paul. Great presentation and reminder of what marketing department should be doing, but probably lack the resources and automation to do it. Thanks. Love the nod to Ren and Stimpy too. Well, that's something old and Robert used to watch like crazy when we were kids. Next question is from John. John says, what size should a CI team be?
how long is a piece of string? Good. I mean, quite honestly, it depends on the size of the organization, depends on the importance of the function, it depends on the objectives. Very frequently, they'll hire. You'll get one person when they're trying to found a CI team, and you'll be that guy. So if you allow it, you will work as hard as you can possibly work. If you start to structure, if you start to build that Word document, if you start to say, okay, we need to have some rationality in here about what we can actually deliver, then you wind up starting to ask the question, okay, well, what outcome do you want, and how are we going to deliver it? And those are the metrics, the ODMs, that you're trying to do. Now, if you if you want to do something like a fire jumper team, then you have to cut down the number of people you have drastically. Not cut down, you have to cut down the number of vendors, and then enhance the specialization, because I mean, you can't be an expert on everything. It's like I said, how long is a piece of string? I think the best way to answer that is really to structure uh, your practice and understand like what all the different moving parts are, and that's something that you can then share with the executive team, to your sponsor, and if they want to justify additional headcount, they think it's important enough, okay. If not, then well, okay, you can get budget. If not, then you can talk about cutting down the program a tiny bit and scaling it back. And I'd say that's probably the one of the best things you can do.
Cool. Thank you. Next question. All right, just a second. Okay, so for Mark, what skills would you look for in particular?
I've always been a big fan of rolling your own CI. quite honestly. I can teach, and somebody who has an analytic mind, or at least somebody who's curious. And that's what I would start with, rather than trying to find like the perfect CI person, because maybe you will, maybe you won't be able to find them out there. Look for somebody who's actually motivated, and then like unless I'm not talking about founding a CI. I'm talking about CI practice. I'm talking about if you're hiring people or you're taking on interns or whatever, just know that there's whoever you're going to hire doesn't know your market. They don't know the practices that you know, and you're going to have to teach them. And if you accept that, you can teach them right, and you can develop a lot of good practices. And that, to me, winds up being a lot better than saying, okay, we're going to pay this exorbitant fee, and you know that this person, as long as you're giving them some sort of career progression, or they're happy in their job, that they'll either stick around or maybe they'll jump. But you'll stay in touch with them, and then you
Well,
know
let me interrupt you there because we have a question. What would you do after your stint in CI?
uh the logical progression might be RevOps, or you can keep moving up in CI depending on if you're in an organization that's growing. I've Market intelligence is a lot of fun. You get to get into a lot more analytics. You can run persona projects. You can dig into ICP, ideal customer profile. Um, these are things that are very much RevOps driven. Uh, the a persona project well done can make a huge difference for a marketing organization. So yeah, I mean, CI can be a career in and of itself, depending on the size of the organization. Um, you can stay there for a good long time, or you can move on to something else. I mean, depends on the organization you're with,
Okay.
your ambitions.
Colette asks, are there specific events a CI professional should attend?
So sorry, could you repeat that?
Are there specific events a CI professional should attend?
Depends. Not any that are not partisan, as far as I know. I mean, you can look on LinkedIn, you can find organizations that are out there, um, and begin to work with. But I mean, for the most part, you're looking at the various different CI vendors. They run some events, and that's about it. I don't.
And,
I've never. I've networked informally.
and since we're out of time, we're right at time. Rob asks, what
Uh-huh.
CI tool makes your life easier and not have to think and deliver battle cards on the fly without any effort whatsoever?
Okay, so first of all, I've used other vendors. So this is, you can look at my face. I'm not going to like give you any micro expressions or anything else. Other vendors are quite honestly a pain, and we take a lot of the hassle and pain in the out of creating battle cards and doing stuff like that. It I can get a battle card updated and going in 1 hour at the longest, and that's when I'm trying to formulate a really complex prompt. So, I mean, this is the aquarium. This is what you need to be using, or at least investigating. And then once you see what it can do, you'll be probably ready to take the next step.
Fabulous. Thank you all for attending today. If you have any questions, please reach out to Robert or myself. If you have anything on CI, Robert knows more than I ever would. If you have any questions on the aquarium, please reach out to Lionfish. Myself, Lisa Hawk, our head of sales, will be happy to schedule a demo for you. Thanks so much and have a great day.